StrayAllDay.com.
You're now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day, to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative. That is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into a series of frameworks, approaches, insights, strategies, and techniques all underneath the umbrella of one unifying philosophy that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is, we are on part 2 of our ongoing, now concluding mini series on why people use logical fallacies. So I gave you the background on this yesterday. I also gave you a 4-part series on the actual fallacies themselves, starting at episode number 3110. So if you have not referenced those, then you know what to do. Workonyourgamepodcast.com is where you can see a conclusive list of every episode in the history of the show. If you can't see any particular episode scrolling backwards in your feed on Apple or Spotify, in my experience, from what I've seen, they tend to only load the last 300 to 500 episodes. And being that we have over 3,000 episodes of this show, any episode that you cannot find there, you can just go to workonyourgamepodcast.com. That link should also be down in the description to this episode. So let's pick it up right here at point number 4. Topic again: why people use logical fallacies. Number 4, logical fallacies take conversations that are about topic ABC and turn them into a conversation about topic XYZ. Now, why would anybody want to do that? Well, there are several reasons people want to do it. As a matter of fact, just in yesterday's episode, I was referencing Kamala Harris and Donald Trump debating in 2024. Politics is a great place to see why people may do something like this. In politics, you have to be really good at what they call the redirect. The redirect is when you as a politician get asked a direct question that is a kind of a tough question, because answering it would put you kind of in a bad spot no matter how you answer it. Whether you tell the truth, it puts you in a bad spot. Whether you try to lie, it will put you in a bad spot. So what you do is you redirect the energy of the question, and instead of actually answering that question, you answer a different question. As a matter of fact, anyone who is trained in media knows how to do this really well. A person who has been, for example, maybe if you've been trained to take the stand for a court case, you will get trained on the kind of questions that the opposing legal team will ask you. And though you are under oath and can't lie, there are ways to still not give an answer to a certain question without lying. And you get trained on how to do that by your legal team. So redirecting is an important skill that you need to have if you're in media, and especially if you're in politics, because in politics, one of the downsides of being a politician, and this is something that often when I'm doing my live streams and talking about politics, people ask me, Dre, why don't you run for political office? And the answer is, I would not run for political office as politics currently exists, because for one, there is no way to please everybody. No matter what you do, somebody's going to be really mad at you. Why would I sign up for a job like that? Number 2, you have to toady up to people who would actually give you money so you can run your campaigns. And when someone gives you money so that you can succeed, they expect something in exchange. So they essentially become your boss. Not a fan of having a boss. And number 3, because when you're in politics, the way politics is presently constructed in the United States of America, you cannot be successful without lying. You have to either tell a direct lie, you have to lie by omission, or you have to lie by basically giving people the parts of the situation that they want to hear, but not the parts that they don't want to hear. And or you have to mislead and redirect when someone asks you a direct question that you don't really want to answer, because if you answered it honestly, you would look bad and it will hurt your career. That's the short version of why I wouldn't want to be in politics. You want to see the long version or hear the long version of why I would not want to be in politics. I'm sure I've talked about it. That was in episode number, I've talked about politics a lot here, but the one where I told you why I wouldn't want to be in politics was episode number 1667. Why I would fail in politics was episode 1667. And one of the reasons is, well, some of the reasons are what I just told you, is that there's no way that you can please everybody, and you have to lie to be successful. And if you don't lie, then your opponent's going to lie. And your opponent tells lies and you're telling the truth, you're probably going to lose. And this is just how it works. So anyway, the reason why people would redirect is, again, if you were to ask, and Kamala Harris actually did this in the same example that I gave you yesterday. Kamala Harris got asked a question that I believe was about the borders, the security of the southern United States border, which we all know was very porous during the Biden-Harris administration. And the question was about that, or illegal immigration, stuff like that. And she made the conversation about Donald Trump's rallies. That is a shift. That's a redirect. She said, well, instead of talking about that, you often hear politicians will say something like, they'll get asked a question. They'll say, well, what you should be asking And that's the redirect right there. What you should be asking is why my opponent is doing X, Y, Z, A, B, C. And they'll just change the subject to something completely different and never answer the actual question. And what's funny is that a lot of politicians, even when they see their opponent doing this, they're not good at pointing out what their opponent just did. They're not even good at doing it. So even people at the, I guess if you want to call this the highest level, politicians, highest level of at least debating, because they know they have to debate to win, and these people are allegedly smart, they don't even notice logical fallacies when an opponent is using it, especially, again, when you're getting put on the spot. It's hard to call it out. That's why you got to prepare ahead of time. And the number one hallmark of a professional is that they are prepared. So this is how people who commonly use logical fallacies are often able to throw other people off the scent of their bullshit, because they get the other person to talk about something that has nothing to do with the original subject. This is often done by personalizing the topic. This is the most common way that someone uses a logical fallacy on you, is that they personalize the topic. What does that mean? That means they start criticizing you in some way, shape, or form, or something that you take personally. It doesn't actually have to be criticizing you. When Kamala Harris said nobody comes to Donald Trump's rallies, she wasn't really criticizing Donald Trump, but Donald Trump took it personally. You understand? So it depends on what you take personally. So if someone said to me, Dre, you're a terrible tennis player, I probably wouldn't take that personally. Or they said, Dre, you weren't that good at basketball when you played, I could have laughed that off. I wouldn't take it personally. So it depends on who you're talking to, what they take personally. And if you miss, then it doesn't work. But if you nail it and you pick the right subject that gets them reactive and gets them defending themselves, then it works. Again, Kamala did do this. The one thing that I will give her credit for, at least in that debate, was that one right there, because it damn sure worked. So when you personalize the topic, you criticize the person rather than addressing the point, or find something that the person takes as a personal criticism, then you have successfully used the logical fallacy. And that's a very tempting bait for a lot of human beings. And generally, the more egotistical the person is, the more opportunities you have to do this. The more egotistical a person is, the more space they provide, the more openings they provide to attack them in a way that they take personally, which would lead them to losing the plot of where they're supposed to be going and going in a completely different direction. So as they say they used to say this when we were kids, when it came to like physical altercations, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. So the bigger someone's ego is, the more juicy targets they are providing. The smaller someone's ego is, the harder it is to use this on them, because they don't take anything personally, even if you try to attack them. So again, you have to know who you're dealing with to see who this will work with and who this would work on and who it would not work on. And it's often very tempting bait for the egotistical. So if I make a logical point about a subject, for example, and you respond by attacking me personally, most people cannot resist that bait of defending themselves personally, which means maybe just defending themselves or attacking you back. And now it's an argument about you talking about them and them talking about you, and the conversation lost the plot of talking about the actual point that you made. You see how easily and how quickly this can happen? And all of you, again, have been subject to this at some point in your lives. So this is why most people cannot point out logical fallacies, because their logic gets blinded by the personal defense mechanisms and the desire human beings have to stand up for and defend themselves. And again, in my experience, men are much more prone to doing this than women. Now, I'm saying that from a man's perspective. So maybe women are just as much prone, but I'm guessing it's men, because men have testosterone, and testosterone gives us drive, and that drive makes us want to defend and attack when we feel like we're being attacked. So again, when I'm doing my lives and someone says something like, well, just because you have on a suit and a tie and you have a bookshelf behind you does not mean you're smart. There are a lot of men who would take that bait and start defending themselves, or they would attack the person who left the comment in that moment. But again, I've seen it so often, and I've been on the internet for so long. Like, I even say to people in the middle of my lives, I'll say this, is that the best you can come up with? Like, you've been listening to me talk all this time, and you had a chance to leave a comment and have me read it, and that's what you came up with. You got to come with something better than that. Why? Because I have enough experience to notice the bullshit before it even comes, so I don't react to that. But there are other people who would very much react to that exact thing in the exact same situation. So you, listener, you got to be able to resist the bait. Okay? You're in the emotional management business. I've been telling you all this for a long time. The first time I talked about the emotional management business was episode number 560. All right, way back in 2017. You're in the emotional management business, which means you have to know not to take the bait of getting into a personal back and forth with someone when they are trying to get you to do so. Because when you get into the personal back and forth with the other person, even if you have enough material to quote unquote beat them, you have lost the plot of the conversation, which was the actual topic, which has nothing to do with you against them. Okay, now the conversation is about you against them, and the actual subject you're supposed to be discussing now is completely out the window, and everybody forgot about it because now everyone's paying attention to the back and forth between you and them. This is the most common tactic, and this is known as the ad hominem fallacy. This is the reason why most people use it so often. So when someone says what I just told you, just because you have on a suit doesn't make you smart. That's an ad hominem logical fallacy. And if you can't resist defending yourself and or attacking the person who said that, well, you fell victim. So if I'm talking about something like, I'll give you another example. I was doing a live stream. I was talking about the educational system in America, which, if you're familiar with my position, maybe you know this. And if you're not familiar, let me make you familiar. Educational system in America is garbage. It's shit, and it should be torn down and torn apart. Now, I say this as a college graduate, as a person who went through the public school educational system K through 12, and I think most people look at me as a quote unquote success story. I am a success, I attest, not because of the educational system, but despite the educational system. I'm much more a product of a two-parent household than I am a product of the educational system. But anyway, the point being, I was talking about the educational system and trashing it, as I should, and I was sharing my disagreements with the system, and someone who doesn't like what they were hearing, they said something like, well, Dre, how are you an expert in education? Where'd you study education? Do you have a certification for this, that, and I get these kind of comments that people will ask when they're challenged. They don't like what I'm saying, so they come up with a way to try to discredit and or invalidate the speaker rather than discredit or invalidate my point. Again, that's another form of the ad hominem, attacking the person rather than attacking the point. And when people say things like that, understand it is designed, even though it's a simple question, it's not the topic. So the topic is not about me and my credentials. The topic is about what I'm saying. So if I say I don't like the educational system because the educational system in America, specifically in public schools, is government mandated teaching. The government is in control of it. As of now, as of this recording, we have the Department of Education, which is federal. So the federal government is deciding what gets taught in schools and what doesn't get taught in schools. I don't trust the federal government. Therefore, I don't want my kid going to a government sponsored school. All right, that's the logical line that I'm drawing. And there's a bunch of other points that I can make on the subject. I can go 2 hours on the subject, which I'm not going to do here. But I'm making my point. So if you disagree with my point, then just challenge my point. But see, there is no challenge to that point, because unless you're saying you like the federal government determining what gets taught in school. I don't. If you do, then you can just say that. But most people don't want to argue with that point. So what they do is they try to find some other point to argue on that is not what I said. So they'll say something like, well, how are you an expert in education? How many years have you studied the educational system? Do you know anything about X, Y, Z? So they'll pick some detailed part of the educational system and say, well, what about this? Or what about that? Or what about that? And again, if you take any of this bait, then now they got you. They took you off your plot. So they took you off your path. So what I will say when someone tries to do any of those things to me, because again, I've had it happen many times, I say, that's not the topic. That's not what I'm talking about. That's not the point. That's not what I said. And I'll even call them out on it. I'll say, I see what you're doing there. And I'll explain to the rest of the audience, okay, so this person is trying to go down a rabbit hole to something that I didn't say so that they can find a way to be right, but it's not going to work. And because I'm controlling the airwaves, they really don't have any recourse. So even though it's a simple question, and people ask these questions all the time, well, this is one that you'll see often. You'll make it a point about a topic and they'll say something like, how are you an expert on ABC, whatever it is that you said? And they'll say it kind of in a ridiculing type of way, such as a way to discredit you. Since you're not an expert on the subject, why are you talking about the subject? This is a bullshit frame. It's a bullshit logical fallacy. And the reason why it's bullshit is because if I was saying something that you agreed with, you wouldn't be using that frame. So let's just say I was praising the educational system and saying that it's a great system. Someone who loves the educational system would not come in my comments and say, well, who made you an expert on education? Because you wouldn't want to invalidate me if you agree with me. You're only trying to invalidate me because you disagree, which makes it a logical fallacy in and of itself. If you really believe that I shouldn't be talking about the system in any way because I'm not an expert, then you should invalidate me even if you like what I'm saying. But you notice no human being ever does that. No human being ever says, so let's say there's an argument about LeBron James versus Michael Jordan, right? And someone who has never played basketball has an opinion, but their opinion is one that you like. You wouldn't say to them, well, you never played basketball, so who cares what your opinion is? If their opinion is the same as yours, you wouldn't say that. But if their opinion is different than yours, then you would try to find ways to poke holes in them as a person, let alone their argument. Why? So you can invalidate them, because emotionally it makes you feel better to invalidate someone who says something that you don't like. This is how logical fallacies work. And as you can see, I can talk about this stuff all day, but let's continue. It's designed to get you to, again, go off the path and get off the topic at hand, and then you go in another direction. And again, the reason why this works so well is because human beings have egos. And again, generally, this works a lot better on men than it does women. in my experience. But if it's woman on woman, then this works really well too, because women can be very nasty verbally, often much more to each other than they are to other men, believe it or not. And ladies, you know what I'm talking about. Point number 5, today's topic once again is why people use logical fallacies. Number 5, many people use logical fallacies all the time when they talk, but they're completely unaware of it, and they go through their entire lifetimes doing it simply because so few people are keen to noticing it, let alone can someone point it out, let alone can someone explain it. So in order to get someone off a logical fallacy, first of all, you got to notice it when they're using it, because people can talk very fast. So you got to notice it when they do it. Second, you got to point out what it was. And third, you got to explain why it is. How many people do you know have the ability to do all three and catch it like in the moment, real time when it's happening? It's another thing to catch it like the next day. You're like, oh, damn, this is what that person did to me. I had people say that to me sometimes in my comments. Like, yeah, I didn't catch that one till I had somebody do that to me, Dre, but I didn't notice it till like 3 days later. See, to really catch people in their bullshit, you got to catch them right when they do it. So go talk to someone who's ever done any like a trial attorney. Those people are really good at it because they got to catch the bullshit in the moment, and you got to call them out on the bullshit, and you got to hit them with harder rhetoric than they hit you with, and you got to catch it like right there. Anyone who's been on a debate team, especially high level debate teams like college debaters, these people have to be really good at it. People who are on talk shows where they have guests that they like antagonistic guests, or you go on shows and you get antagonized by the host. You got to be able to go like talk radio. These people got to be really able to catch people in their bullshit in the moment and catch them right there so you can kind of verbally slam dunk on them. So anyone who's been in one of those spaces, they're good at this. Most people are not. So one simple website to get started with pointing out and noticing the most common fallacies it's called yourlogicalfallacyis.com. The website is yourlogicalfallacyis.com. I was just looking at it yesterday. I believe it's the 24 most common logical fallacies, and almost every other fallacy is a derivative of these 24. And it gives you examples. It explains what it is, gives you an example, and it gives you a title. And in my experience, just working with people in general, people are much better at doing things and understanding things when you can put a label on them. So when I put a label on these fallacies that I've explained to you, as I did back in episode 3110, it's much easier for you to point them out when you notice how often people do it. In my experience, the ad hominem is probably the most common. That's the one where people attack you, the person, rather than attacking the point. The next one is the straw man. That's when someone takes something that you said, they rephrase it into something that you didn't say, and they turn it in, and then they ask you to respond to something that you didn't even say. They ask you to defend something that you didn't even say. That's a straw man. I would say that's the second most common. And the third most common, I would say, if I had to pick one, third most common is the false binary. The false binary is when someone presents you two options. They present a question as if there are only two options when there are actually 1,000 options. So the false binary is basically putting you on the horns of the bull, as they say. Horns of the bull, the bull has two horns. So no matter which way you turn, you're going to get gored by the horns. That's the false binary, or also known as the false dilemma. Those are, in my experience, the three most common, but go to that website and you can learn how these things work. So these give you a proper reference guide. And I guess, especially in debate and disagreement, you're going to start noticing these really, really quickly when you had a proper reference. So the internet, the Encyclopedia of Philosophy, for example, lists, there's a website called the Encyclopedia of Philosophy. It has a list of 231 logical fallacies. So if you want to go university level on this stuff, then you can go there. All right, 231 logical fallacies. But again, as I said, the 24 on yourlogicalfallacyis.com generally give you the key ones, and then everything else is often a derivative of those 24. Point number 6. Today's topic, once again, is why people use logical fallacies. Number 6, the key to making yourself immune to having logical fallacies used against you, because it's almost inevitable that someone will use them against you. And it's also almost inevitable that you're going to use some yourself. Actually, I guarantee you that you will use some yourself and not even notice that you're doing it, is that you must first learn to control your emotions, and you must control your reactions. Learn to put a space in between the stimulus and what you do, which makes it into a reaction by definition. A response, by definition. It's a reaction when there's no space. It's a response when there is space. You must learn to control your emotions. You must learn to control your reactions to things. Again, I know I have some people in the legal space who listen to the show. When you are training or preparing your client to be cross-examined, I'm sure part of the preparation, and again, I don't have a law degree. I just pretend like I do when I'm on TikTok. That's a joke, because people often ask me if I'm a lawyer when I'm on TikTok. I did a whole series on that as well on this show. But when you're preparing your client for cross-examination, I'm pretty sure part of the preparation counsel is that you teach them to not emotionally react to something that is said to them by the cross-examining attorney, because everything they say can and will be held against them by the jury or the judge. So you got to be very, and the lawyer, because if the lawyer notices they're reacting to something, they're going to press on that and get you continue to react, and they're going to use whatever they can against you to destroy you on the case. Well, I mean, on the stand, rather, to destroy your client, that is, on the stand. So any of you who's ever testified in court and been cross-examined, maybe you had this preparation. Hopefully you got this preparation from whoever was supposed to be preparing you. So learning to control your emotions and reactions is a great way to be able to catch people in their logical fallacies, because it's very hard to catch someone in a logical fallacy when you're in reactive mode. It's damn near impossible. Damn near impossible to catch somebody on their logical bullshit when you are emotional. Now, it's very easy to catch someone in emotional bullshit when you're logical, but you cannot catch someone in logical bullshit when you're emotional. That's why you need to control your emotions. And if you can learn to play with other people's emotions in a ethical way, when they're emotional and you're logical, then you can learn to start maneuvering people like puppets, again, in an ethical way. So you got to learn to check your emotions and your ego at the door, all of you, especially you men. And this is why I talked about the episode on being smart and not being tough. I just did this not too long ago. So you got to learn what the common logical fallacies are. Again, listen to episode 3110 where I explain them and I give you examples. And you must be able to point them out as soon as someone tries to use them on you, like right there on the spot. Because an entire conversation can be derailed if and when you fall into the trap. That's why you got to avoid the trap. All that said, everybody, let's recap today's class. This is part 2 of our mini series on why people use logical fallacies. Number 4, logical fallacies take conversations about ABC, turn them into conversations about XYZ. All right, this is why people do it, because they redirect to get you off the topic that you actually want to talk about, which might be uncomfortable for the person. That's why they use the fallacy to get you off that square. Number 5, many people use the fallacies all the time and are completely unaware because very few people are good at pointing them out. So why would you ever notice? And number 6, key to making yourself immune to logical fallacies is that you must learn to control your emotions and control your reactions. Ideally, you don't react hardly at all to damn near anything, unless it's like a real situation. Somebody tries to punch you in the face, you should probably react to that. All right, so that you can duck the punch. But generally, you should learn how to turn what would be a reaction into a response, because when you're logical, you can control other people's emotions. But when you're emotional, you cannot control other people's logic. So you want to always be in position to control the situation, and the person who controls the situation is the calmest, most emotionally controlled individual in the room. They're the one who always controls the situation. Whoever gets reactive is being controlled. They're not in control. All that said, everybody, tomorrow, actually, no, this mini series is done. Tomorrow we got another episode. I'm not going to tell you what it is. It's going to be high level game as usual. Between now and then, go to workonyourgameuniversity.com, find out about who we're working with, how we work with them, why you need to be next, and take the next step right there. Work on your game. Dre all